Music Loves here, and this is the 6th video in the DSP Basics series. And today we're going to be talking about the decibel and why the decibel is a thing, how it's a thing. And just to start off, I'm not an expert on this topic. There are plenty of people who know more, but I'm going to tell you what I know. And if I say something wrong, I'm really sorry. Just, let people know in the comments, hey, well, this wasn't quite right. But let's talk about this. Have you ever wondered why in digital audio 0 decibels is the threshold, why it clips when it goes beyond 0 decibels? Because wouldn't it make sense that you have no pressure and then, because you're hearing sound pressure waves, I guess we should really quick talk about this. So there's 2 pressure levels, and the difference in intensity between that is where we get the term our decibel from. Decibel bell actually comes from, the second part of the word actually comes from Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the telephone, and it's I think it's the difference of 1/10 of a bell, something like that. And it came from that. That's where the bell came from. The deci part, the decibel, or the decimal part of it, came from logarithms and equations and math and things. And so we're going to get into it really quick. I'm going to try and keep this pretty simple. I may brush over some details just because they're not like, unless you're getting really into audio engineering, they're not totally necessary quite yet. I just want to give you an idea of what's going on with this volume thing. So back to the original question, have you ever wondered why it peaks out at 0 decibels and why we go down? Wouldn't it make more sense that if we hear the difference between 2 pressure levels, we start at 0 and then we go up? And that's the way it actually works with decibels. But a decibel is actually a ratio. It's a logarithmic ratio. And because it's a ratio, we can go from 0 down just as easily. But if you were to hear like hearing thresholds of pain and stuff, like if you go up, I think it's like 140, 150 are where people start to experience pain. But in digital audio, we obviously, if we can only get to 0, then we've got a problem. That's because this is set on the ratio, like I said before. So your ear is actually a pretty incredible instrument. It can hear differences in atmospheric pressure. So a decibel, as I said before, does atmospheric pressure. So you have something that vibrates at an intensity. Let's say that it's really intense and it goes way less intense. It goes almost all the way completely away and then it comes all the way back. This is our decibel that it's rating. It's checking out the differences in intensity right now, okay? And your ear is totally incredible. It can hear extraordinarily small differences in pressure. It's like, I believe the thing I read was like a millionth of a microbar or something like that. It's really, really tiny, like so tiny that if it were much tinier, you could hear like molecular motion. Like that's how incredible if you have a healthy ear, one that is like functioning normal. But actually most people can hear differences that small versus you can also hear 10 to the 13th in atmospheric changes. So that's a ridiculously huge number before it gets so loud that you literally can't hear it anymore. But you'll be experiencing tons of pain before that anyways. So let's talk about how we get that ratio, because this is a very wide ratio, into our rating right here, our 0 decibels down. And you got to get rid of the idea of pitch if you're brand new at this, because this is not pitch we're measuring. So don't think of waveforms and stuff like that. Think of intensities and atmospheric pressure. This is actually called SPL, sound pressure levels. And they're used as ratings on microphones. You will actually see the decimal rating start out with 0 dB on the outside. And as it goes in, it will get reduced. And a microphone will not reduce it to negative infinity. A microphone will usually reduce it to like negative 30 decibels, which is an outrageously huge change in volume. Because if we play our sound and then we turn it down, you see once we get to 30, it's almost gone. And if we keep going, it just disappears. So what is the deal with that? Well, let's make a graph real quick. And to graph it, I already have one here. Cool. Whoops. That's not the control button. All right. So right now, this graph is a straight line. And let's say this represents our decibel range. This is 10 to the 13th to 1. Let's just say that's that. And we have a linear graph. Well, this graph is, there's no way to really comprehend numbers that big or numbers so small. And so what we need to do, or what we did do, was we decided to take a logarithmic graph, which makes computing with it much easier. And so basically it looks like this. And so now we're just going to talk about the practical uses of this and kind of call it good at that. When you increase in your decibel, you go from 0 to 1 or from 1 to 2. You're not increasing very much down here. But if you come over here to, like, let's say this is 8 just arbitrarily and this is 9, you just increase your volume compared to over here like 20 times or 100 times. So this is a real thing. When you make a decibel cut by 3, you actually just have the volume, which, as we just discussed, is not that big of a deal. But as you continue to take the volume down, you're not just having it, you're exponentially increasing. So when you get to 30, you've taken down the volume like 100 times or 2,000 times or whatever the official term is, but you've taken it down a lot more than just half, because we hear logarithmically. And so that's why taking it down and decreases the volume as it does. And that is because we hear logarithmically. So now let's talk about why this decibel rating, why 0 decibels. Now this has to do with being digital, and I'm assuming you watched the previous video on bit depth. So the way this works is it takes the logarithmic. So if you don't know what logs are real quick, if you take a number and you give it like a logarithm, like logarithm base 10, it's going to flatten it out to a number that'll fit on our graph like so, and it will make numbers a bit more manageable. And that's one reason why we use it in computing. The numbers are just substantially more manageable. But this takes a ratio. Logarithms, the way we've set it up is it takes a ratio. And so if you have, the reason why we went with 0 as the top is because in analog world, this wouldn't really matter. But in digital world, you've got bit depth and you have 16 bits, 32 bits, all this stuff. So if we were to render out a song in 16 bits, we only have 16 bits of like possible volume levels, right? So if we only have 16 bits of possible volume levels, this means that we can only get so loud. Now this creates some interesting problems, because if you were to increase it to 32 bits, suddenly our top decibel range would be way louder. It wouldn't increase the resolution. It would increase the literal size. It would get way too loud. And so what they do is they take your possible value. So if we have like a value of 3,000 in our range, let's just keep it simple. So let's say we have a value of 3,000 over a value of 3,000, and the top number's the value of our volume, and the bottom number's the value of the loudest possible volume. So this is a 1-to-1 ratio, and we'll set that to be 0. So bang, 0. But let's say the ratio above is like 2,000 and below 1,000. So that would cut the decimal volume as a ratio, and we'd go down. And thus we would go down and down and down and down and down until we have nothing. And that's how you get to 0 decibels. But technically in this case, it wouldn't be 0 decibels. It'd be negative some outrageously small number. So that is why it starts at 0 and goes down. At least to my understanding, that's how it works. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. Like, comment, and subscribe. And have a blessed day.